Hi, I'm Sarah Cowgill, along with Andrew Moran, James Spite, Dave Patterson, and Graham Noble. This is the Conservative Five, an online TV production of Liberty Nation News. President Donald Trump held a presser and declared he was federalizing the D.C. area. Too much crime, and that folks from Indiana and Iowa were getting mugged on the streets of the capital city. Well, I don't know about that. But drastically reducing crime was a tenet of his 2024 campaign, and he has taken action in many different ways. Trump signed an executive order to deploy the National Guard and declared a federal takeover of the Metropolitan Police Department to put violent criminals behind bars. And then Trump introduced Jeanine Pirro.
We need to recognize that the people who matter are the law-abiding citizens, and it starts today.
She's tiny, but talks tough. Dave, let's talk about this and the Jeanine Pirro effect.
Well, interesting way of putting it, the Jeanine Pirro effect. Well, in Washington, D.C., it's finally about holding the city's feet to the fire on crime and lawlessness. Pirro, she's a former judge and prosecutor and doesn't mince words. She's gone after the teenage punks terrorizing neighborhoods and called out the politicians who look the other way. In a city with a murder rate higher than Bogota, Colombia, her message hits a nerve. She demands accountability from leaders, and why not, who refuse to support law enforcement. She gives voice to residents who feel abandoned by a system that seems about criminals' rights more than the victim's safety. And it's true. Pirro's approach is unapologetic and direct, qualities sorely lacking in D.C. political establishment. She doesn't sugarcoat the reality. Violent crime is out of control, and the people in charge aren't doing enough. And that's why she's there. By spotlighting these issues on national television, she's forced the city leaders to answer tough questions rather than dodging them as they have in the past. No, I think Jeanine Pirro effect is rightly put and means there's finally someone who's willing to say that what many Americans are thinking, crime is destroying our nation's capital, and it's time to fight back with real consequences, not empty rhetoric.
Well, it seems to me that it was, with all the trouble going on with, the Epstein stuff and blah, 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 and Pam Bondi, and everybody's getting a little tired of the lip service, I'm going to say. Man, nothing like trotting her out and having her call people a bunch of punks and going crazy. I mean, Jim, what do you think? Optics, or is she a real push for the safety of D.C.?
Well, Sarah, I think it's let's not limit them, right? Let's not sell them short. Maybe it's a push for the real safety of D.C. that has great optics. I actually
there, Jim. Yeah. Welcome back, by the way. We've missed you.
I've just been out here hiding in the woods. I like that Dave made the reference to Bogota, Colombia. I'm going to call that foreshadowing for the point I want to make. I actually did a little bit of look into the stats. So last week, I want to start with a quote. Last week, there was a quote from D.C. Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, and she said, and I quote, "Even if crime in D.C. weren't at a historic low point, President Trump's comments would be misguided and offensive to the more than 700,000 people who live permanently in the nation's capital." D.C. residents, and this is where it gets kind of funny to me because she makes it a race thing, and that totally backfires when I get to the stats. D.C. residents, a majority of whom are black and brown, are worthy and capable of governing themselves without interference from federal officials who are unaccountable to D.C. All right, so that's what she says, right? And we've seen this trotted out in many of the news reports from the leftist news outlets. Oh, but crime in D.C. is at a 30-year low. And it's down violent crime's down 35% from 2023. So we're talking 2024 numbers here, of course, because we're still in 2025. But
we found out. I thought we found out that they were fluctuating numbers.
No, that's true. It is true that it's down 30. According to the Department of Justice, it is down. Murder specifically is down 32%. And still, even with those reduced numbers, at a 30-year low. Okay, well, let me back up a little bit. In 2023, the violent crime rate in DC per capita was slightly more than 2 times the national average. All right, so 200% of the national average. We've reduced that by 35%, so it's still half again worse than the national average, and that's what we're bragging about as a 30-year low. That's not good news. I mean, it's good news that fewer people are being robbed and killed, of course, but it's not the rosy picture that Congresswoman Norton wants to paint, or the other, her fellow Democrats in D.C., or the media folks. I mean,
it's all about the spin.
Exactly right. Homicide is down. I'll make a city comparison, kind of like Dave did, but maybe a little less funny. In 2024, so this is the reduced numbers, right? This is the 30-year low. There were 187 homicides in D.C. with a population of just over 700,000. Compare that to New York City, highest population city in the country, 400 murders. So a little over twice as many murders, but 12 times the population. So you're 8 times safer in New York than you are D.C., and that's D.C.'s 30-year low?
All right. I think you've got us sold. Let's, Graham, let's talk about what's the most pressing thing to tackle first. I mean, really? I mean, is it reality? or are we going to round up some criminals?
First thing they should do is loosen some of the gun control regulations they have in the city, so that the many law-abiding, decent people who live and work in DC can defend themselves. And also on Capitol Hill in DC, there's this big kind of shelter. I think some people think it's an insane asylum, but there are a bunch of people who work in that building who are probably a big part of Washington DC's overall problem. So maybe move them out as well. But really, what you got to do is you got to start actually holding people accountable for their crimes, particularly, the violent crimes in particular. These people have got to know that if they commit a violent crime, obviously up to and including homicide, they are going to go to prison, and not for just, a few days. There's got to be accountability. And that's the root cause. I think one of the main root causes of the violence we have and have had across this country for several years now, maybe a couple of decades, is that these left-wing judges and prosecutors and DAs, they're simply not, they're giving everyone a slap on the wrist, if that. And so therefore, yeah, of course, if you're one of these people who is inclined towards criminal activity and you're a natural predator, then yeah, of course you're going to go out and commit more crimes, because you know that what's going to happen to you? Nothing. So that's the big problem. They've got to start actually, it's not so much, yeah, sure, they can beef up law enforcement and actually, go out and catch more of these people, but that's not, that's only half the battle. You've actually got to, once you catch them, you've got to actually incarcerate them so that they learn that this is just not acceptable behavior.
Okay. Here's my question, Andrew. They're begging for more Border Patrol agents. They're trying to get Border Patrol agents who have retired under the Biden administration, probably because that was the most ridiculous job to have at the time. And now they are begging, so they're begging for federal agents on the border, but now they're going to pool their resources in DC. How does that fly financially? I don't get it.
Well, I was going to make a few points, but I know James took up most of our panelists' time here. But I'll say a few things. First, I wish our legal affairs editor, Scott Cosenza, would be here, because he would declare whether this was a constitutional act or not. Second, that press conference, if everyone watched the whole thing, man, that was jam-packed. I had never seen it. I've covered, Washington politics for many years. I've never seen that full in my lifetime. Now, to your question, yes, they are begging for agents, but they're also receiving an exceptional amount of interest, maybe because of the new direction of the current administration. One number I saw said that Border Patrol applications soared 44% between January and May compared to the same period a year ago. Now, to your question, does the U.S. government have the resources to resolve the situation in D.C.? Now, fiscally, of course, our conversation comes as the U.S. government reported a $261 billion budget deficit, up significantly from a year ago. But one thing I'll say, the optics of the situation will not be kind, because one issue, there was another press conference with Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, and a reporter asked about the homeless situation. And Trump said on his Truth Social, hey, homeless people, get the heck out of town, go at the furthest edges of the city. And then Leavitt, she said that they're going to enforce existing laws to clamp down on homeless people. And, if they don't abide by what the authorities say, they could face fines or jail time. Now, if there's about more than 5,000 homeless people in Washington, D.C., and, not only I doubt you'll have the resources to capture them all, I doubt you'll have the justice resources too, to funnel them through the whole justice system process. So I think that's something to take into account. But if you're, grabbing homeless people off the street, for sure CNN is going to be grabbing that footage and plastering it all over, and it's going to be declared war on the homeless. Trump hates homeless people. So I think that is a side of the conversation also to be focused on over the next coming months.
So we're gonna see that feisty little thing, Jeanine Pirro, take on the punks in Congress and take on the punks on the street and probably the punks in the press. I think I'd look out for her. I doubt she'll be taking any prisoners. Thanks, panel. That's it for our Conservative 5 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform. YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble, we're on them all. As well, Liberty Nation News has its own Roku channel where you can see all of our TV productions. Now, Liberty Nation does not endorse candidates, campaigns, or legislation, and this presentation is no endorsement. I'm your host, Sarah Cowgill. Thanks for joining us today for the latest news and commentary, your choice for free thinking, free speech, LibertyNation.com.